Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
Whoa. Good morning. My name's Juanita W, and I'm a member of the 31W Al-Anon family group in Louisville, Kentucky. Hi, everybody. That's the 31W group cheering out there. They knew I was talking and came anyway. So they're pretty special people. A whole lot of them are special. Gosh, this is never comfortable for me, doing this. I would a whole lot rather you just see this little old chubby lady wandering around and say, isn't that a nice old lady? But when I get through talking, you're not going to think that. I came through the doors of this program on February the 4th, 1960. And for 46 and a half years, I have been doing my best to work this program in my life on a daily basis. I'm trying to think of all the things I have to do before I get into what I want to do. I have to thank the people for inviting us down here. We have a beautiful room. Never had one that big in our life. And it's a suite, and we got everything with it. It's just wonderful, and we thank you for that. We had a preview last year when we went up to Carol's suite, and I'd been really hurt if I hadn't gotten one. No, we would have been fine with anything we got. But I do thank them for considering me for a speaker. This weekend has been absolutely incredible. Angie, my gosh, what a speaker. Isn't she something? Give her a hand. Oh. And I went to workshops that were well done, well organized, and well put on. They were wonderful. And I heard Bobby and interrupted his talk with my cell phone. And I'm not going to bother explaining that to all of you all. But really and truly, that's the first time it's ever rang. I don't give my phone number out. But I'll tell the story if you want to hear it later. But I do thank everybody for inviting us to be here with you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I've had a wonderful time so far. Now it gets tough. I'm going to talk about me. I met this man when I was in grade school. I was in the 3rd grade, and I left that school to go to another one to get away from him, I think, because he teased me. And when I met him again, it was in high school. And first, I thought he was cute, and I thought it was nice, but the first thing I noticed about him is he smelled funny. And I thought, what's wrong with him? And when I got closer, because I'm no stranger to people drinking, I realized he'd been drinking while he was in school. And so we dated, but only on the condition he wouldn't drink when he was with me. And that's pretty much of an Al-Anon stand, isn't it? You do what I say do, and we'll be okay. And so we dated, and we broke up more then than we did after we were married, but that's because I had more leeway to get away from him. But the day we were going to get married, when he asked me for the ring, gave me the ring and was asking me to marry him. And I still have the same ring. We looked at it, and I looked at the ring, and I looked at him, and I said, I cannot marry you because I made a vow I would never marry a man who drank, and you drink too much. And this man looked me straight in the eyes with those big blue eyes and said, do you think after we're married that I'll drink like this? After I have children and responsibility? And I ended up apologizing to him and asking for the ring. He was able to work that scam on me right straight through to Al-Anon. He would, no matter what I was angry about, he would turn it around and say, I worked 2 jobs and you're keeping me up. This was at 3 a.m, and I'd say, I'm sorry, go on and go to bed. And I'd been saving up for a whole day and a half what I was going to tell him that he'd been doing wrong. But he could just turn it around on me really quickly. But then I got a little crazier, and it got harder for him to turn it around. Because I'm not proud of this, and I'm going to preface this with what I want to say. Because the things I did in this alcoholic marriage, I did because I wanted him to change. I wanted him to be the person I knew he could be. Because, when I married him, I thought, this is it. He'll change. And he did. He got worse. And I couldn't handle worse. I couldn't handle the way it was before. And with no control, I went crazy. I tried everything to keep this man from drinking. I did everything I knew how to do to keep him from drinking. And then I started waiting up for that, coming through the door at 2 and 3 in the morning. And at first he would bluff me out and say he had to get some rest and go to bed. But after that, it didn't work. I was ready for him, and I had things I was going to say to him, and he was going to listen. And if he'd go in the bedroom, get undressed, get in bed while I'm still right behind him, and pass out. And I would be so frustrated. I'd go out in the kitchen, fix up a big pitcher of ice water with ice cubes, come in and pour it up and down his body. And he jumped up, dried off, got dressed, and went back out. I never got a chance to say anything. And I was left with a mattress that was soaked with water and the sheets and beds that had to be changed. And I never did that again. I was smart enough not to put too much work on me. But the one thing I did do on a regular basis was pack his suitcase. I would put all his clothes in bags and boxes and suitcases and sit them out on the back porch. And 3 days later, I'd have to go take them in and bring them in and put them back where they were belonged. Because he never noticed they were there. We had a daughter 1 year from the day we were married, and I thought, oh, this is it. Now we're a family. He's going to settle down. Well, he still had a little drinking to do because he was playing ball and going and bowling and all these things that he did. Never stopped. He kept on doing it when we got married. Now I had a baby, so I was home with the baby, and I was very resentful. But I was okay because I enjoyed the baby. Then we had a second baby, and then we had a third baby, and then we had a fourth baby. And all at once, these things are really getting bad at our house. And his drinking had accelerated, so it was really tough on us. And I can remember telling him one night, I said, you need to sit down, I have to talk to you, and I'm not going to yell. And he said, okay. And I said, we are older now. We have a family. And we have to stop doing all this running around, going to all bowling and all this stuff we do. I said, we've got to stay home and take care of the children. And he said, that's a wonderful idea. And he let me do it. He never gave up anything. I would like to say that up until this time, our marriage was still full of trust and love and all that. But I'm sure that I didn't trust him a lot there in that end. But eventually, with the drinking, the trust was leaving. I didn't trust him anymore because he lied to me. And it was really important to me to prove to him that he had lied to me. I would do anything. I mean, I'd go background and dig into things and have people call and verify that what I said was true. And when I'd prove it to him, he'd say, so what? And I just never could get the best of him. When we had this fourth little girl, now I knew why he drank. Because if he was married, his sister and his brother and sister-in-law had 3 daughters, and he drank himself onto Skid Row. He was on Skid Row drinking. And I thought, that's why Bob's drinking. He needs a son. So I went to Mass every morning. I was a very religious person. I went to Mass every morning and told God how to run the day. And then I'd come home and then go back the next day and tell him how he'd screwed up and give him one more chance to get it right today, get him out of that beer joint. And but I told God, this has to be a boy. And when Robbie was born, I was so excited because, here I had done it. I had given him a son. Now he had a son. And I waited 3 days to see him because he was out celebrating the birth of a son and forgot I was in the hospital. And when he did finally come through those doors, now I was talking divorce. I was going to kill him. All these things were checking off on my list of things to do to him. And he walks through the door and he has football helmets and baseball gloves and all these boy things, you know. And I just melted. He was going to be a father to this baby. Now, we had 4, but he was going to be a father to this one because it was a boy. And in 2 weeks, he was back doing the very same things again. And I thought, well, maybe another boy would do it. So I'm not going to keep you guessing. It's 9 children. And this was our 6th boy was born. And now I was really happy because I figured if he had a boy in either hand, he wouldn't be able to carry the beer bottle. And, you know, the first little boy's birthday was coming up. And I ran over to the drugstore to get a gift for him. And, I was over there to get medicine, and then I picked up a little gift. And it was a little battery-operated razor. And when he opened it up and looked at it and pressed the button and it started buzzing, he said, "What is it, Mommy?" And I said, "Honey, it's a razor." And that little fella raised his pants leg to shave his leg because he didn't know what a man did with a razor. He had not seen his father. And that was a turning point for me. I filed suit for divorce. That's it. I'm out of here. And, of course, he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want you to quit drinking." He said, "Okay, I'll quit." And he did for 2 weeks. And somehow or other that 2 weeks was pretty good. And I had hope that we might do it again. And I was pregnant with the 7th child. And I can remember thinking, this is not going to work. I can't work and support this many kids. I'm going to have to do something. And so I filed suit for divorce again. And he did the same thing again, promised he wouldn't drink. And we tore up the papers and he went right back to drinking as soon as the papers were torn. But with this time, his brother had staggered into the central office of AA in the city of Louisville and asked them to help him. And they called his parents and said, "Can we bring him out there?" Because there were no treatment centers. And the only way a drunk could get in a hospital was with a broken leg. You know, they had to have something physically wrong before they could get in drunk. And so they brought him out to his mother and dad's home. And these alcoholic men, 2 by 2, stayed with him morning, noon, and night. They took shifts. And the 2 men would come in. They bring sheets down to be washed. They'd take washcloths up to, help him. And they'd come down and ask for things like orange juice. And then we'd pour them a glass of orange juice. And then they'd say, "Do you have any Cairo syrup?" And we'd say, "Yeah." They'd pour the thing full of Cairo syrup. And I was going, "Oh, my God." And they said, "He needs sugar right now." And they got him through those first 3 days of just awful things that he went through. And he went to those AA meetings. And he got sober. And he stayed sober. And he was sober for, I guess, maybe 6 or 8 weeks. And he got back on his feet and was doing well. And he came back to our house and he said, "I want to borrow one of Bob's shirts and ties and a sports jacket." Well, see, when Norman borrowed something from us, he usually hawked it. And we never saw it again. And I wasn't too anxious to let him have it, but I was so happy he was sober. And I said, "Tell me about this thing you're going to." And he said, "Put the coffee pot on." And I did. And he put the coffee pot on and he told me about what he had found with you people. The help and the love and the unconditional love and the acceptance of who he was at that point, not who he had been. And he said, "They are wonderful people." And he says, "Honey, you were right when you used to tell me don't drink that first beer." We'd be at a first communion. This family's German, and they ice up the beer before they cook food. And so anything that went on, baptisms, confirmations, everything, Holy Communion, the whole 9 yards, they had the beer on little ponies out there, iced up and ready to go. And I would tell him, "Don't drink that first beer," because I knew that first beer changed my uncle. And my uncle ended up jumping out of the Brown Hotel window. And he swore he was only trying to get air when he leaned out too far. And that might be true because he never really wanted to hurt himself. But he had lived for 9 days. And in those 9 days, he said, "I've messed up my whole life with alcohol." And he said, "And I guess this is the price I have to pay." And so I knew that he didn't want to be the way he was. But I knew that first beer changed his whole personality. And when Norman said that, I said, "Wow, I haven't been right about anything for so long, it feels good." And so he sat there and talked about AA, and he talked about what he'd found. And he said, and I said, you got to take Bob to that meeting. And he said, honey, I can't take Bob to that meeting. He has to want to go. That's one of the conditions. And the second one is he has to call and ask me to take him. And I thought, hell will freeze over before that happens. And I remember Norman just laughing and saying, then hell's going to freeze, honey, because I'm not going to do anything. He said, I will carry my message to him, but I won't ask him to go. And so Norman stayed sober and got better and got back with his family. And everything's going along fine for him. It's getting worse for me. And finally, they were going on a fishing trip. Bob and Norman were going down to fish. And I said, how long are you going to be gone? And he said, we're going to take about a week. And now we didn't have money to buy groceries, but he was taking this fishing trip. And I said to him, I said, you're going to get Norman drunk down there because you're going to drink. And he said, I told Norman I might have a beer or two, but I'm not going to drink heavy in front of him. And he said it was okay because it wouldn't bother him. And I said, well, he's your brother. He loves you. And he doesn't want to hurt your feelings. But if you really loved your brother, you would go ask him to take you to one of those meetings so you could find out how you can help him over this week to stay sober. Now, in Bob's talk, he says I tricked him into AA. But you all heard the story. You know I didn't trick. And so he went to that meeting, and that night, I knew enough that they liked to eat cake and ice cream after the meetings, and I baked a cake. I had the ice cream in the freezer. I had a coffee pot on, and I was ready for Norman and Bob to come back from that meeting, sit down and tell me all the wonders that they had found, and we'd have a wonderful life from that moment on. It didn't happen that way. I heard a car door slam. I heard the back door jerked open, and I went right down in the kitchen, and I said, where's Norman? And he said, he's gone home. And I said, what about the meeting? He says, you're never going to take another night out of my life. I can't help my brother. And he got the car keys off the rack and went out the door to get drunk. And it was the first night he had ever gotten the keys off that rack and out the door without a fight. Because, see, I knew if he killed somebody, that it would just change my life completely. Now, I want you to notice that this is all about me. He would go to prison for killing them, but I would be the wife of a jailbird, and I didn't want that. And I didn't want to have to live with my children and tell them your father's a killer. And so I would fight for those car keys. And a lot of times, well, most of the time I won because I was pretty violent about it. And but one night, of course, I was always pregnant. He grabbed the car keys and he was trying to get them out of my hand, and I doubled this hand over it, and somehow or other he did something, and I did a complete flip and sat down on the floor right in our living room. And I just sat there for a minute. Now, I never once thought, oh, my God, has this hurt the baby? That never crossed my mind. I just looked up at him and said, you've sunk as low as a man can sink. You've struck a lady. And he looked around our living room and said, I don't see any ladies. And I can't tell you, and I can't even re-feel it myself, the rage that came up in me. It was just like a white foam just coming up, and it was white hot. And I reached for the first thing I could find, and it was the fireplace equipment set. And I grabbed the poker. And I turned and swung that poker down with every ounce of strength in my body. I meant to kill him because I wanted him dead. I wanted him out of our lives. Thank you. Oh, God, thank you. Stop the tape. He came up and told me how many minutes I got. I got to behave. Okay. And I broke his arm. And he's hopping around the living room. It was at a rather odd angle. You know, it didn't look right. And he's hopping around and saying, look what you did, look what you did. And I said, I meant to hit your head, I want you dead. And he says, take me to the hospital. And now I had these keys. And now in this instant, from this white hot rage, this anger and awful, I throw the keys in the middle of the floor. And I say, drive yourself. I don't care. Live or die. I don't care. And he got the keys and he went. He come back home and they couldn't do anything because it was swollen so big. They just had it wrapped up in a sling. And he sat across the table from me and he said, look what you did. Aren't you ashamed? And I said, no, I meant it to be your head. And 6 years after Al-Anon, in Al-Anon, I went on a retreat. And I asked that priest, why have I never felt any shame about that night? And he said, well, honey, some of us are sicker than others. And he says, you haven't hit him since, have you? And I said, not with a poker. Okay, so my brother-in-law's in AA, and I can't get Bob to those meetings, but he went and he came back and he didn't get it. On Friday, I told him, I said, Norman called and says he wants to take us to the meeting on Friday. Well, actually, I had called Norman and asked to go to the meeting, but I told him Bob wanted to go, and he said, really? And I said, well, he didn't get much out of that meeting. And he said, no kidding. And I wasn't fooling him, but he went along with me. So Norman picks us up and takes us to this meeting. And we get to this room, and it's about half the size of this. Big room in a church. I don't know what they do. But anyway, we came in the door, and the woman was standing over here in this corner. And she had hair down to here, gorgeous auburn red hair, a beautiful woman, legs from the floor up to her armpits. And she comes charging across the room towards us. And I'm going, what is she doing? And she grabs my brother-in-law and kisses him. Now, he's just gotten back with his wife, and I'm scandalized. And I said, and then I doubled up my fist because I thought, don't reach for mine, sister. But now, I didn't want him, but I wasn't going to give him to her in front of me. And she turned to him and said, you must be Norm's brother, Bob. And I'm thinking, oh my God, Norman's been telling them about us. And then she turns to me and says, are you going upstairs to learn how to live with your drunken husband, or are you going to stay down here with us? And there was no way in God's green earth I wanted to learn to live with my drunken husband. I stayed with them. I was not going to, I had no interest in that. So I stayed there with them. And somehow or other I got separated. I ended up on the front row, and the man that talked had 7 children. We're expecting the 7th one. I just, this was okay. This was great. I was listening to every word he said. And he said that his wife had kept the family together, kept food on the table, the roof over their heads. And he was just so indebted to her. And I'm sitting there going, oh, I could see flags waving back here. I could hear onward Christian soldiers. And I mean, I was ready. I had found what I needed, what I was going to get for him or die trying. And you'll know later I almost did. It was wonderful. I was thrilled to death with this. And on the ride home, I was just jabbering away. And when Norman let us out, and he said, you call me tomorrow, Bob? And Bob said, sure. And we get out and we get in the house. And I said, wasn't that wonderful? Oh my gosh, it's great. And he said, I'm not an alcoholic. And I said, yes, you are. And he said, no, I'm not. And they tell me nobody can say I am until I say I am. And I thought, well, who the heck are they? So we had a big fight and over whether he was going to go again or not. And it didn't matter to me because I had gotten one of your little directories at that AA meeting. And I loved AA. I went to a meeting. I took in sewing so I could get to meetings almost every night. And I went to all these AA meetings. I didn't know any of them were closed. Nobody asked me if I was, nobody ever said, are you an alcoholic? When it came my turn, I just said, I'm Juanita. And that was it. And one night I was getting ready to leave, and this one man says, honey, you're going to remember where you were tonight. And I thought, I remember where I am every night. What's he talking about? And but I was learning something. I was finding out what he was doing. I heard all these drunkalogs and all the things they did. And as I heard these things, I got angrier and angrier until it was a rage again. And I was very, very abusive. When he'd come through that door, I was waiting for him for a fight. I wanted a fight. And he never raised a fist to me. And so I was left to do the pummeling of the, whatever that thing is that he was walking around in, that body. And I was abusive. I would wait till he passed out. I'd put my feet in the small of his back and then shove with all my might just to hear that body hit the floor. And he would jump up and say, "Well, what happened?" And I said, "You're drunk. You fell out of bed. Please stop bothering me." Now, I was going to a lot of AA meetings at this time, but finally I decided that these two little gray head ladies came out to that one group I like to go to on Friday night, and they said, "We're going to start an Al-Anon meeting here, honey." And they said, "We hear you're not an alcoholic." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not." And they said, "Well, you need to come with us." And I said, "I am already the president of the Altar Sodality. I am president of the PTA. I'm a room mother in 2 classes. I don't have time for any more volunteer work or auxiliaries." And they just smiled, and they said, "Honey, you come with us and we'll help you." I thought they meant get him sober, and I went like a lamb to slaughter. I got in that room. There were 3 men, 1 lady, and these 2 old gray-headed ladies and me around a card table in one of them little dormers in a church that was unbelievably hot. And I'm thinking, why are we sitting up here when you could be down there with the air conditioning with the AAs? But they started their meeting just like we did with the steps and the traditions. And then they said, "We're going to have a discussion tonight, and we're going to talk about resentments." Well, I didn't have any resentments. I didn't know what they were talking about. And so when it came my turn, I just said, "I pass. I don't know what you're talking about." And I did this. Every Al-Anon meeting I went to, I passed because I had nothing to share. And one little thing I forgot to tell you is he didn't like to see a woman smoke or curse. So I bought a box of those DeMaurier cigarettes that are really, really expensive. And they would come in a leather box, and I took one out. I lit it up. I inhaled and nearly died. Choked to death and upchucked and everything. So I only puffed on him around him. I just, and blow the smoke in his face. And he also didn't like to hear me curse. And one time I called him an SOB, and I wasn't using the initials. And he drew himself back and said, "Don't you ever call me that again. That's not cursing me. That's cursing my mother." And I thought, well, she's raised 2 of you. She ought to be cursed. And so my language became very, very bad. I mean, I couldn't speak without all those words falling out. I would try to catch them when I was around church people, but I couldn't always do it. And then I'd just smile so sweetly and say, "Well, darn, I can't believe I said that." And this is how I was. And like I said, when I called him SOB, it wasn't the initials. It was the real thing. Because I'd do anything he didn't like. And there's a little girl who came in Al-Anon many years after I was in, and she said that her husband, and she come in, she had a black eye and a cut cheek. And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "Oh, he was drunk and he gets abusive. He's okay." And I said, "Why didn't you have him locked up?" And she said, "Oh, he hates it in jail." If he'd hit me, I'd had him locked up, and they'd had to put a revolving door in that jail because as fast as he got out, I'd have got him back in. I just couldn't understand her. And to this day, I still don't understand it, but it's not my place. So anyway, they had a lot of potluck suppers. A couple came up from Owensboro and talked about that she had a cast iron skillet, hit him in the head. When he came to in the hospital, he called AA. Well, that was on a Friday night. But You see, the alcoholics talked to me a lot, and they kept telling me that he was not going to get sober or ask for help until he had hit his bottom. So I had been creating bottoms for him right up till that night. Whatever happened to the speaker I heard that night happened the next day to Bob. And I'm in Winn-Dixie on Saturday morning, racing down the aisle with the cart, and this lady grabs hold of my arm and says, Juanita, I've run you down 2 aisles. Where in the world? And she looks down in the cart. This was the beautiful lady with the long red hair. And she looks in my cart and she says, no. And I said, oh, yes. And she says, you're going home with me. Now, I bought the skillets. She didn't keep me from buying the skillets, but she did take me home with her. And we sat down, she put the coffee pot on, and this beautiful lady did what you AA women do all over the world. She sat me down and shared her story with me. She shared her pain and her loneliness. And I can remember right at that point when she was talking about loneliness that I just broke down. And I said, do you know how lonely it is in a house with nothing but little people around your knees? And no one to talk to. I can't tell my parents how bad it is. And his parents don't want to hear it. And I can't let my friends know how bad things are. You don't know what alone is. And she said, well, honey, there are other people in that room you're going in that would help you if you would just stop passing. And I said, I can't do that. I'm working on not using foul words anymore. And if I break in and start talking a whole lot, I'm going to use them again. And she said, I don't think so. She says, but I really think you need to get some help in those rooms from the people who can help you. And I went home, and I wish I could tell you that I was a changed person because I had heard all this from her. And, you know, I halfway believed her because, see, when men told me that he couldn't help drinking once he took the first drink, I thought you all were just in cahoots with one another. And when a woman told me that, I had to believe it, that he didn't want to take that first drink, but when he did, he couldn't help himself. And she did explain blackouts to me, because we had a lot of fights over those, because we'd wake up the next morning, I'd be madder than heck, and he'd say, what's wrong with you? And I'd say, after what you did last night, you're asking me what's wrong with me. And we'd do all this back and forth, you know, and then finally, when he almost was through asking me to tell him, that's when I would tell him. And I would tell him what he did. And this man would look me straight in the eye, and he'd say, I'm not that kind of person. I didn't do that. And you know, I knew he wasn't that kind of person, and that he didn't do that. But he had done it. And he'd go out the door, and I'd be standing there all frustrated with this. What is wrong with this picture? I'm always in the right, and he's always in the wrong, but he makes me feel like I'm wrong. And that's the way it was. I went to a lot of meetings, though. I went to a lot more Al-Anon meetings. I didn't make too many of the AAs anymore. And this little old gray-headed lady that said she was my sponsor, I told people I'd go behind her and say, no, I'm not. She's not my sponsor. Because I had said one night, she said, where's that sweet old boy? And I said, he's down at the bar drunk. And she says, oh, poor baby, he's so sick. And I said, sick in the head? And she said, no, honey, that's you. Would you ask that lady to be your sponsor? I wasn't having any of it. And when people say, oh, you're Hallie's baby. And I go, no, I'm not. No. And I asked 100 people in my first year to be my sponsor and never called them. I just asked them. But this old lady called me, and I resented that. I didn't want her interfering in my life in any way because I would enjoy telling her what he had done the night before. But she always listen just a minute, and then she'd interrupt and say, and what did you do? Well, I wasn't going to tell her that I'd hit him and drug him through the hall and all the things I did. I wasn't going to tell her that. And so I'd just say, nothing. And she'd say, I don't think you're being truthful. And I'd say, you don't know me well enough to call me a liar. And we just had these conversations, and I hung up on this old lady more times than I would never have been able to tolerate somebody like me. But she persevered. And see, Al-Anon was only 3 years old when I came in. So in our area, and right there in Jeffersonville, New Albany. It started in New Albany, went to Jeffersonville, and then came to Louisville. And they were really, you know, when they had a live one, they really worked on them. I mean, the whole groups would just center in on you. And they always wanted to know what you did. And I wasn't about to tell them. And finally, it got to a place where I just gave up. And after 28 years, I let this old lady have the job. It was, you know, just let her be my sponsor. Because she was going to insist on calling me anyway. I might as well just ask her questions then. But we came to a place where I had to file suit for divorce. And this time, it was because I had to, we were going to have to move in with my mother. We'd lost our home. We'd lost everything we owned. And I had the 7 kids at this time. And we had to move in. My mother bought a big house. My dad had just recently died. And she bought this big old house. And she said, I'm buying that house and you and the babies are going to move in with me and we'll get rid of him. And I said, good idea. And she bought the house and we're getting ready to move in. And Bob says, don't you need somebody to take that wallpaper off that one room? And my mother says, yeah, I do. And he says, I'll do it. And so he's over there taking the wallpaper off the room. And somehow or other, we all moved in together. My mother, my husband, and me, and 7 kids. And I'm going, this is not good. Because my mother was a very dominating and opinionated woman, and there was no backing her down on anything. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to need Al-Anon more than ever right now. But you see, I had never taken any step in this program because it didn't make sense to me. I'm not powerless over alcohol. I don't drink. So I just X that step off. And the next one, you know, I've never been crazy. I X that one off. And turn my will and my life over to God? I don't think so. You see, I came out of grade school and went straight to a convent because I was going to be perfect when I grew up. I was going to be the perfect person. I was going to be holy and perfect. And I went off to be a nun. And I stayed 3 months. And when my mother's voice was on the phone that night in the rec room, and with no thought of it in my head before, I just burst into tears and said, Mom, I want to come home. And it's because they wouldn't let me talk. They were those, and the novices had to do their work and all that stuff without talking to anybody. You couldn't talk to anybody. So I was miserable. And my mom come and got me and brought me home. And I thought if I turned my will and my life back over to God, He'd put me back in that convent. And it never dawned on me that it just says the care of God. That God wasn't going to take my free will away. But those things weren't getting through the fog of hatred and anger and resentment that's built up in my head. We all moved in. My kids had 3 bosses. If they asked a question, they would look to me. My mother would answer. Then Bob would give them the opposite answer. And then the kids would look back at me. Do we or don't we? And you know, I was wrong either way I went. If I said yes on my mother's side, then Bob would throw a fit and storm out. And if I said yes on Bob's side, then it wasn't a pretty picture at all. Because my mother would really give us a tongue lashing and yell and holler at us. So the bottom line is that we were miserable, and I filed suit for divorce because my children were having trouble in school. Our oldest daughter, who went through high school and college on scholarships, was failing the 4th grade. And I couldn't believe it. I told the teacher, I said, something's wrong, because she's not stupid. And she said, I know there's something wrong. She says, and you know, if I didn't know you so well, because mind you, I'm the ultrasound president, the room mother, and all these things, she said, I would think there was a drinking problem in your home. And I said, what makes you think that? And she says, because, you know, my dad drank, and he made our lives miserable. And she says, and I hated my mother. And I said, your dad drank and you hated your mother? Did she drink too? And she said, no, I hated her for making us live in the hell we were living in. I got in the car and drove downtown. I had worked for an attorney, so I filed suit a lot for divorce because I could just type the papers up and hand them to him and he'd file them. But it was okay. This time, when I went in, I didn't offer to drag those papers out and make a copy. I said, well, I need a divorce. This time, I need the divorce. It's got to be right now and done. And so when they served Bob the papers, he did what he's always done in a crisis. He goes fishing. And then when he comes back, the crisis is over and everything's fine and he doesn't have any problems. And this time that's what he did. He loaded up his car and went fishing. And I believed he was gone because I'd asked him, to quit drinking, and he had said, I can't. And he'd gone out the door doing that. So for 3 weeks, the kids and I got into a routine of living with my mother. And it wasn't a fun thing, but it was better than it had been. And one night, I'm getting dressed to go to my regular meeting on Friday night. It was my home group, and it was at 8:30, and it's about 7, and I hear this awful bang. And when you have 7 little kids, well, the little one wasn't into it, but when you have the bigger ones, you move quick because you don't know what they've broken. And I raced down the steps, and my husband and my mother are standing on the door to the house, screaming at each other. And I just turned around and went back upstairs to get ready for my meeting because that was not my problem. It was her house and her door. And he wasn't my husband anymore. I got up there and I'm dressing again, and I hear the children. And they're all, coming up the steps. And I look at the oldest one and I said, what are you doing? What's wrong? And he said, Daddy's got a gun and says he's going to kill us. And I said, your daddy's not going to kill anybody. And she says, he just went up in the attic, Mom. And so to prove her wrong, which is how I learned every lesson in my life, I opened the door to the attic and stared up the barrel of a 12-gauge shotgun. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, your mom called the police. She wants them to take me away, and I can't live without you and the kids. And I'm thinking, you've been gone for 3 weeks, But I backed up and closed the door and took a deep breath. I went downstairs, and as I got to the bottom of the landing, my mother was coming out of her room with her .410 shotgun. And I said, what are you going to do? And she said, I'm going upstairs and get rid of the problem. And, I would be less than honest if I didn't tell you that I had just a little bit of moving aside and letting her do it. But I didn't. I stuck my arm across the stairwell, and I grabbed the hold of the gun, and I said, Mom, you're not going up there. There's another way to handle this. And she said, no, not with a gun. We're going to, and we're arguing. And this was the precise moment that the police came to our front door. This was a warm day, so only the screen was there. They see 2 women struggling over a gun, and they call out the riot squad without ever knowing about the nut in the attic. Well, needless to say, it was really bad because by that time, my other mother goes out and tell them all about, and they said well, they were going to shoot tear gas in the house, and Mom says there aren't any windows in that big attic. It's all roof. There's no way to get anything into the attic. And so she's doing the talking to him. I'm not. And then finally she comes back in the house, and she did put her gun back in the closet. And we were grateful for that. But she gets me and she starts preaching to me, and I'm just really upset. And I said, Mom, just leave me alone. And I went and picked up the phone book, and I called the group that I was going to go to that night because I knew Bob's brother was in the AA part of it. And it was a miracle that night. The women of the church wanted to set up a quilting frame, and they used the room where Al-Anon usually met in. And so the pastor opened his office and set up chairs in there for them to have a meeting that night there. And they were able to answer the phone. That's the only reason that phone was answered that night. It always had been locked in the pastor's study. And I asked to speak to Norman, and I must have sounded normal. And Norman got on the phone, and I said, Norman, Bob's got a gun up in the attic, and my mother's got a gun in the bedroom, and the police are surrounding our house, and I don't know what to do. And he said, just wait, honey, we'll be there. And so he comes, and he brought 3 AA members with him, a priest and 2 AA members. The priest had gone to school with Bob and I. He'd gone into the priesthood, and he had a drunk in his parish, and he was coming to the first AA meeting to find out how to help this man. And So Norman went up and got Bob's gun. It took both AA members to convince my mother not to use her gun. And the priest went out and got rid of the police. And there we were. And then they come down, they said, we're going to take him out to Our Lady of Peace Hospital. And I said, we don't have any insurance. And they said, we'll work something out. And so out they go. And they'd talked my mother into taking a sleeping pill, and she was passed out in the bed. And I'm sitting there with the telephone in my lap, and I'm going, oh my God, what is going on? And I went upstairs, and I stood in the darkness of that bedroom, looking down. Our house is on a semi-hill. It's a foothill of the big one in Louisville. And I'm looking out that window, and I'm thinking, if there's a God, He doesn't love me, because I have tried everything. I've done everything that was suggested I do. I've worked my program. I've tried everything. And I can remember it was just like somebody poured warm molasses over me. And I heard this voice. It was my sponsor's voice, but and she said, you're the one, if you're not as close to God as you want to be, you're the one who moved away. He's too much of a gentleman to force himself into any area of your life. But if you want His help, you ask for it. And I held my hand out in the darkness of that night and said the first prayer I had ever prayed in my life. I'm Catholic. I recite prayers. I never had prayed a prayer until that moment when I said, God, help me. And it wasn't help me pay the bills, help me pay the insurance. I did keep his insurance paid up. Nothing. And I just felt this warm feeling, and I laid down across the bed and went sound asleep. And when the alarm clock went off at 6 the next morning, I jumped out of that bed like it had been hot wired, because I did not know where my 7 children were. I had no idea. And I ran back to the bedrooms, and none of the beds had been slept in. And as I was passing the oldest girl's door, I noticed her closet door was shut. And I don't know about your kids, but my kids never shut doors or drawers. And so I ran back to that closet door, and it was locked. And the chair was sitting there beside it. And I shook the door, and I said, Cindy, are you in there? And her little voice says, Mommy, are you okay? She was 9 years old. She had taken 6 brothers and sisters into that closet with her. And they had a blanket and some pillows. And they had spent the night in total terror that somebody might kill them. And because Bob came out of that hospital and went into AA, and I began to work a program of recovery, because, you see, I had just taken the first part of my first step. Now, I'd learned to use this Serenity Prayer. I thought that was the craziest prayer that ever been made, because you got to try to change it before you know you can't. Until our beautiful Neil hit the podium like that and made this awful sound. I come that far out of my chair, and while I was up there, she said, I am powerless over persons, places, things, and circumstances in my life. The only thing I can change is my attitude towards what's happening to me right now. And I sat back down, and I thought, she just explained the Serenity Prayer. I mean, it was, everything was new to me when I learned it in this program. And I was not a bad girl, so I'd been listening and reading and going to church and all that stuff. But it was things like this that helped. And it wasn't very long after that I went to an Al-Anon meeting, and the lady who talked got up and talked about duking it out with good old Bill. And I'm thinking, what? And she said that she'd meet him on Friday night at the factory gate. And if they'd have a fight. And if she got the check, they paid the rent and bought groceries. If he got the check, they might get some money on the rent paid, but they didn't have any groceries. And she said, and Al-Anon helped me to realize I didn't have the right to hurt him like that. And I was just sitting there crying. And she came back after she finished talking and put her arms around me. And she said, what's wrong? And how can I help? And I looked at her and I said, how did you stop doing those crazy things? And she just sat there for a minute. And she said, let me think. And she says, well, I tell you, I knew he was a child of God. And I knew that God loved him. and that he deserved respect because he was a child of God, no matter what he did. And I said, are you kidding? And she said, no. She says, I really quit the fighting. She says, I've never hit my husband since I've made that discovery. And, you know, I was able to go home and do the same thing. I no longer had that kind of fight in me. I let him be. And one night my sponsor said to me, because I said, he's still drinking, and she said, Juanita, has it ever occurred to you that maybe God's allowing him to continue drinking until you get humble? I almost died. I thought, oh no. If his drinking depends on me changing, and I knelt down that night and I had a real good long talk with God. I told him, I said, I will do anything. I have already taken the first step. I know I can't change him. I know I can't fix him. I know I can't do anything. And I came in before the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you didn't cure it, and you can't cure it. Whatever. And he created. I'm not going back to that again. Anyway, they came out way after I had made these decisions that I was going to live just as we were living. I was going to have to change everything about me. And when I made that promise to God, my husband got sober. I don't know that there's a connection. I really don't. But my sponsor made me feel the guilt of it. So what do you do when your sponsor does that to you? Anyway, we came along. We were fine. He went to AA, and in the first months he had to go, every day, twice on Saturday, 3 times on Sunday. And for 3 months he did that, and I stayed home with all the little kids because my mother would not babysit for me to go to one of those meetings. And she thought those 2 little old gray-headed ladies were the sickest women that she'd ever met. She says, they don't have any spine at all. And so I didn't get to Al-Anon meetings. And I can remember one night, I'm trying to get the kids to bed. The boys have got themselves locked in the bathroom, and they won't let the girls in to get their baths. And it's just bedlam. And I just sat down in the middle of the hall floor and thought, nothing's changed for me. He's not drinking, but nothing's changed. He's still gone all the time. I'm still here in this house alone, taking care of these babies. I didn't tell you my mother moved out. When he moved back in sober, she moved out. She couldn't handle that. And so I'm sitting in the middle of the floor just bawling. And these 2 oldest ones now, they were 10 and 9 and 7. And they had been going to Al-Anon. Now, I didn't want them to go to Al-Anon because I thought they'd tell what we were doing in that house, and I didn't want anybody to know how bad I was. But my sponsor had taken them, and they were going to Al-Anon. And they walked around me, and as they got past me, the one leaned over and says, she really needs a meeting. I'm the one who started this whole thing. I'm the one who got him in AA. I'm the one, and then I started laughing because I wasn't the one. It was just that pompous ego of mine that just popped up. And I just went down like a balloon getting all the air out. I just went flat. And when he got home that night, I met him at the door, and I had that look on my face, and he had that frightened look on his face. And I said, we have to talk. And he said, okay. We sat down, and I said, I just had a real fit tonight. I lost my program. I lost everything because I am not going to meetings, and I need to go. And something's got to be worked out where I can get to a meeting. And he let out a big sigh. And he said, is that what it's all about? And I said, yeah. And he said, we'll work something out. And we've been working it out ever since because all 9 of our children grew up in Al-Anon. One of them went to college at the University of Kentucky and started the first Al-Anon meeting in that area up there. And I wish it was a success story, but it's not. The one that was the most active in Al-Anon is very active in her drinking right now. She's had drinking problems since she was about 16, I guess. We did everything we hoped was right. We told her we wouldn't accept unacceptable behavior, and if she didn't like it, she could get out. And she came home from school the next day and said, you can't put me out. I'm not 16 yet, and you have to take care of me. And I said, oh, honey, they didn't tell you the whole story. I said, I can turn you over as a ward of the state, And they will see to it you come in at 8 o'clock. And they will see to it you don't drink. And she says, I'm going to check that out. So the next day she checked it out and she came home and wanted to go to Our Lady of Peace Hospital. And I said, no, I think you go to Al-Anon. And she did. And she did real well until she got into college, and then the drinking started again. And this same child was drunk, had those long wearing contact lenses in, and she got a Pseudomonas bacterial infection in that eye. And by the time I got her to the hospital and the eye doctor got there to look at it, it had already eaten through the cornea of her eye. And because I was with her, they locked me in the room too. And so we were in the room with this. It's a very deadly thing, I understand from them. I had to wear robes and gowns when I came out of the room and gloves because I was infected in there, they said. And so I stayed with her until they got the eye straightened out and the infection gone. And we had some real good talks while we were in there. And I told her, I said, well, you haven't explained to me yet why you didn't change the contacts. And she said, I was too drunk, Mom. I don't remember being sober at all. And so that happened. She married, and when she had twins, and two twin girls, and I'm telling you, the whole family was ecstatic about it. And our other children, they got together, and they bought a house because they were living. These two people, my daughter and her husband, were living in a one-room apartment. And they bought a house, they painted it, they put carpet on the floor, and they bought the baby double beds. And, and I thought, this is sure to be a change for Missy. She's got to taste up. I didn't do it because she drank because she was blind. And, so when the babies were born, I just knew this was going to be a change too. And it wasn't. We were down in Birmingham when the babies were 3 months and 19 days old. And the phone rang, and my youngest daughter says, Mom, you and Dad got to come home now. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, Whitney didn't wake up this morning. She's dead. And all the way home, and now mind you, we had our sponsors with us in that car, but we didn't say a word. There wasn't a word said in that van all the way back to Louisville. And all the way back, I'm going, why, God? Why would you take a baby that was so loved and so wanted? And it just didn't make sense. But as we got closer to the house, and I knew that I was going to have to put my arms around my daughter, and the only light I had ever had in my life was from this higher power I call God. And I reached out and said, God, please help me. Please help me. I'm sorry I've been angry with you all this time. But I need you, and I can't live without your help. And I went in, and she threw herself in my arms, and she was sobbing. And she says, Mom, why did God kill my baby? And I don't know where the words came from. Probably I had heard them at an AA or Al-Anon meeting somewhere around the country. But the words came out of me. And I said, honey, God didn't kill our baby. He's received her. She's with him in his arms. And we wouldn't want to take her out of his arms. And she looked at me and she said, that helps. And it did. AA and Al-Anon people gathered around us and supported us through that whole thing. They were there for every minute of it. We couldn't turn around without bumping into one of them. Sometimes even in our bathroom and bedroom. But we needed that, and they knew that. And they kept telling us, we're just giving back what you've given us. And we didn't know that we'd given anybody anything. The little girl that survived the twins, she just is a freshman at Transylvania University on a full scholarship. That's the only way she can be there because her parents both drink. And they still drink badly. Or rather, I guess they drink good. It's just bad for us to watch it. But, this program and all the help that we have and all the things that we did have never amounted to anything with this child. She's still out there drinking. And while this was going on, we bumped into our oldest son one night in the east end of town, And he said, I can't stop and talk, Mom and Dad. I'm on my way over to the Token Club to a meeting. And Bob and I were standing there like, what? And he's gone into AA on his own. It was an accident on New Year's Eve. He ran a red light or something and got arrested. And he said that was enough for him. He knew what the rest of his life would be like if he kept drinking, and so he quit drinking. And he's got 4 years now in AA. And we didn't know he even went. And that's the way it should be. They shouldn't be Bob and Juanita's kids. They should be themselves in their own right. And that's the way God meant that to be. I can tell you that I've been very active in my program. I go to meetings on a regular basis, and I have a home group here that's going to make sure I say the right things. And they set them down to keep me honest, they said. But the thing is that I want to explain one thing. The reason that I do tell all the things I did to my alcoholic husband when we were both sick is that one night I had shared at a potluck supper over in Indiana, and this man came up to me afterwards and he said, "Little girl, I am so glad that you told me that." And I said, "What did I tell you?" And he said, "About your anger and about how you lashed out in frustration." And I said, "Oh, you're married to a mean one too." And he said, "No, she died while I was in treatment." And he says, "And when I got out of treatment, I went out after I found out I was sick and that I drank alcoholically and did the things I did because I really was out of control." And he said, "And I spit on her grave." He said, and told her, "I'm sick and you were just hateful to me." And he says, "But I'm going to go back to the graveyard tomorrow and I'm going to tell her I'm sorry for that and that I understand everything she did." And so that's why I continue to tell those awful things I did. Not because I'm proud of them, but because it's my life and it's what I did. And it needs to be shared. And my program is alive and well. I have been active in every area, right up to alternate delegate. But I had 9 children, and they were all most of them in high school in the 7th and 8th grade. They all needed to be driven someplace, taken someplace, picked up someplace. And I don't know about you all, but I was really a sports mama, and the kids were in everything. And I decided then that I could not take on service work in that level because I had to raise these children. And I used to be able to say that I went back as a new GR about 7 years ago, and I did do that. But they voted me out the last time. They voted a new girl. Everybody said she needs to do that. And I, of course, agreed with them. She did, and it was wonderful that our group is represented by someone that new in the program and willing to work that hard, because I hope she finds what I have found in this fellowship. Because we have traveled everywhere, and we have seen people all over the world, and they're all just like our Al-Anon family group at home. They're warm, they're friendly, they hold out their hand, and they love us in spite of what we've been. And that's why I love my home group, because they know the worst of me, and they love me anyway. And they see me on a weekly basis, and I'm not always smiley and happy. I'm sometimes, got something I need to work on. And I'm so blessed with that. If I haven't shared something that's helped you today, keep coming back. There are good Al-Anon speakers. You heard Debbie yesterday afternoon, and I've never heard a better talk in my life. I really can say that truthfully. You were wonderful. And so with that, I'm going to quit with 3 minutes over my regular time. But I'm going to say thank you all for having us. And I just want to mention something Bob and I saw on our way down here. And it says, as long as there are final exams, there will be prayer in school. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.